Hey, what's going on, bullies? Today we are going to look at some news that's coming up. It's going to be some really interesting stuff in the news cycle, of course. Most of it's going to be focused around Bitcoin. So let's check that out. By the way, before we dive in, be sure to hit that subscribe button and hit that like button. It really supports the channel. Thank you in advance. So this article here is talking about China is going to kick out more than half the Bitcoin miners, and that equates to about half of the world's Bitcoin miners. Some highlights were, in May, Beijing called for a severe crackdown on Bitcoin mining, and Texas is an ideal destination for miners. We'll dive into all that in a second. Let's go through this article just a little bit more. It's very important to understand this. They're even dubbing this the Great Mining Migration. Now, China's been home to more than half of the world's Bitcoin miners, right? But Beijing wants them out ASAP, right? And again, they refer to this again as the Great Mining Migration. In Texas, it offers some of the world's lowest energy prices because Bitcoin mining, the biggest cost with Bitcoin mining, other than the infrastructure setup, the actual setup of the equipment, is the ongoing energy costs. So to be somewhere where the energy costs are as low as possible is where they want to be. And that's why they've been in China, because they have such cheap, mostly hydroelectric power. But Texas has some of the world's lowest energy power too because of, for instance, from wind. They have so much wind in Texas and a lot of wind power, especially since Bitcoin mines are running 24 hours a day. Sure, the Texas, China, et cetera, are producing way more energy than they can use because, us, the public, we're using energy mostly during daylight hours, but over the whole night hours, no one's using it. And so, but Bitcoin is, mining is, so it can actually use all that power and take all that cheap power too. So it's a very interesting setup. The biggest problem is them getting from China to Texas. But yeah, Texas has this deregulated grid and also has political leaders that are very pro-crypto. Texas does, and the United States in general. But that's another big thing that these miners are talking about, is that it's so incredibly uncomfortable for them to constantly be in China. Sure, it's cheap energy and everything's already set up, but they're constantly living in fear of what the government's going to do to them because it's China. It's a communist country. They can kind of do whatever they want without much check and balance. In the United States, it's very different. Not to mention the political leaders are very pro-crypto. So they expect you'll start seeing the dramatic shift over the next few months. This is just a really big deal. And if it does come, more of the mining operations come to the United States, I think it's an overall good thing for crypto, obviously. But I think it's a really good thing for the United States, too. Because I've been thinking about it. And the United States is going to be one of the harder places to really adopt Bitcoin as payment because the world is focused on the US dollar and we are the US and it is our dollar. So it's a very challenging decision to start admitting that, yeah, maybe the dollar isn't the best thing to base the value of everything in the world off of. But again, still pro-crypto in the United States. I'm not too worried about it. It talks more about their dominance here. They're already beginning to go to Inner Mongolia, too. So they're also looking for areas closer than the United States to migrate to. Inner Mongolia has a lot. They also talked some about Kazakhstan. But another thing that's mentioned here is that the exodus, as they're calling it, you can really measure it in the hash rate, because the hash rate is dropping, so it tells you that these installations are being turned off throughout the country. Interesting. So it is happening. And they said right here too, we don't want to face every year some sort of new ban coming in China, so they want to get out. And they would love to come to the U.S. and Canada, very friendly places, much more diplomatic. And there are sources such as Texas that have cheap energy. The only problem is moving. They talk about having, I also mentioned Kazakhstan here, but they would be using coal. That wouldn't really be helping the cause, the perception of Bitcoin and mining and its energy usage. It's clean energy. But nonetheless, very interesting article. So it seems like a lot of mines will be coming over to, there will be an increase in mines in the United States and more will be leaving China. And of course, I believe that they will be trying to find clean energy sources, because these are the things that are good for that entire market. Also, El Salvador's mandate, as you know, about a couple weeks ago, they put into law that businesses can and have to accept Bitcoin, but there's a lot of debate going on over that, because making these businesses accept Bitcoin may be a little aggressive, especially in the time frame they want to do it, because they call this a forced tender mandate instead of a legal tender mandate. Because forced tender means you have to accept it. If anyone says, I'm paying you in Bitcoin, you can't say, no, I don't accept Bitcoin, or I'm not set up for Bitcoin. Legal tender law would make it an option, where you'd say, hey, I have Bitcoin. Well, I'm sorry, I'm not set up for Bitcoin right now. And that would be okay. Forced tender means you have to accept it. And it's due to take effect in 80 days. So this article, and many people are saying it's a little aggressive. And me, even as certainly a Bitcoin bull, and I want this to happen, but it's got to be done right. And I think forcing them over 80 days to do this is tough, especially for a country with the lack of resources that they have, the lack of a lot of things, such as things as simple as power. I agree with this. Unwise to force merchants to accept Bitcoin. I want them to, and I think they want to. It's just that they need time to set up and figure out what is Bitcoin. How can I do this? And the state is trying to help. They also would offer, because this whole Article 7, did I highlight that? Yeah. Every economic agent must accept Bitcoin as payment when offered to him by whoever acquires a good or service. So that would be that forced tender, like you have to accept the Bitcoin, which at first I was excited about, then now thinking about it more and hearing some of the thoughts, I'm like, yeah, maybe that is a little aggressive. Like, I think El Salvador and its president, et cetera, really wants El Salvador to become the staple spot of, we were the first to take on Bitcoin, look how well we've done. And I think that those ideas have kind of gotten in his head. He's trying to force it a little too fast. 80 days, I mean, for these merchants to get set up to accept Bitcoin, I think it's nice, because I think a lot of them are going to be forced to learn a lot of things real quick, and there's going to be a whole nice infrastructure Bitcoin payment system setup that happens that will be very awesome in 80 days. But I think a lot of them won't be able to do it because of many, many reasons, such as just not understanding Bitcoin or understanding what to do. And there's also mention of the tax laws. The big thing here is let Bitcoin flourish on its own merits instead of forcing it. And to a large degree, I agree with that. Because these people, they want to, but to make them do this stuff, it might just be too much of a tall order for the infrastructure, et cetera, that's set up there currently. And one of the biggest things that they're mentioning here that they could do is to simply eliminate capital gains tax for Bitcoin transactions. Because that's another thing with these merchants is, all right, well, you pay me in Bitcoin today, and all of a sudden Bitcoin goes up. Now I got to pay a capital gain tax on this candy bar I sold. So they got to figure out the tax laws big time. So this is so new. I think they just are so overly excited that they're just trying to really get it into gear. But I think it would be better for them to take a little bit more time to roll this out. In reality, they should really roll it out like over a year, in my opinion now, because they can really help people set up more. They can figure out what they want to do. They can figure out these tax laws. They can figure out all this stuff. Over 80 days to make merchants accept payments is tough. As much as I want that to happen, it's tough. And I don't think you want to screw it up, because I think it's really important for this to be rolled out well. And because El Salvador has an opportunity to create a model to roll this stuff out into countries. This is a really, 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 really big deal, obviously, because this is a country now having Bitcoin as legal tender. First one to do it. So if this ends up looking like a mess, that's going to delay the global adoption of Bitcoin. So it has to go out, has to be rolled out well. Okay, that's the biggest point that I have there. And lastly, Goldman Sachs ramping up Bitcoin trading. They're partnering with Galaxy Digital, mostly because the demand from their clients that they want to get into some Bitcoin. So as more banks allow clients to trade Bitcoin, this should lower Bitcoin's volatility, and that does make sense. Some mentions here are, banks increasingly face pressure from clients who want exposure to Bitcoin, but these big banks, they can't really do it. They have to find ways to be able to get their clients exposure to Bitcoin, because they can't really directly do it. That's why this partnership is here. And Goldman being, the first major U.S. bank to begin trading cryptocurrency, They're also one of the biggest in the world. This is essentially giving other banks cover to do so as well, which is a really, really big step in the right direction. Like same thing with kind of El Salvador. Like El Salvador is the first country to do it, so if they do it well, then other countries will step in and do it too. Goldman Sachs, they do it well. Other banks will take this on too because they don't want the fear of missing out, and their clients, all these clients are asking for Bitcoin exposure. They're saying, hey, I don't know how to do it, but I want Bitcoin exposure because this seems like something I should be involved in. But because of the strict financial regulations of this industry, there's not a whole lot they can do. That's why this partnership has come up, right? Highly regulated banking industry can't handle Bitcoin directly. So that's why this partnership happens. But it's an interesting move in the right direction, But like I said there, nothing prevents banks from dealing in financial wagers tied to the price of underlying coins. And that's where Wall Street is starting its crypto journey. So it's mostly in the derivatives and futures market is really what they're dealing with here. So they'll be able to offer clients ways to wager on Bitcoin using derivatives. And something interesting to note here that I thought was interesting looking at is that the bank's CIO, Chief Investment Officer for a bank, that's a pretty big position for wealth management, is called Bitcoin a bubble that isn't appropriate for investors. Now, it's not just him being biased because they're so at it. So I felt like that was a really interesting take, an interesting scenario here. We got a country starting to take Bitcoin. We have banks starting to get involved in Bitcoin as their wealth management stuff, but they're dipping their toe in the water, doing through partnerships, etc. A lot of good times going on. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and that like button. Links in the description if you'd like to support the channel some more. You can get $25 in free Bitcoin actually with one of the links in the description. But tell me what you think of this information going on here. We have mining, migrating, countries adopting, banks dabbling. Big developments. And that's really what Bitcoin and crypto progressing is. This year, I was listening to a guy last night, and he was talking about how, in this bull cycle, we've had a country come in. We've had insurance companies come in. We've had hedge funds come in, and there's all these progressions. Next are really the countries, the banking systems, and the such as pension market, and bond markets. But all the money from those investments, but the pension markets in particular are a really, really big one because pension market is about 100 trillion worldwide. So this is exactly what it sounds like, pension, and that has to be one of the most conservative pockets of money in the world, and it's a big pocket, obviously 100 trillion plus, and they can't really get involved in Bitcoin yet, but you see these things progressing, banks starting to get involved, countries adopting it, mining migrating, which is just interesting. I really want Bitcoin to get the hell out of China because I just feel so uncomfortable with them being in China because of them trying to shut down mines. And for all we know, China could just confiscate these mines and make them their own because they can do that. It's China. They can just kind of make a lot of more of their own decisions. And the CCP I really don't trust at all. Not that I really trust government, period, but the CCP in particular I really don't trust. So I think it's a really good thing for mining to be moving out of China, especially the U.S. Come on over, baby. All right, that's what I got for you. Hit that subscribe button, that like button, links in the description. Thanks for watching this with me. You're awesome. I'll see you tomorrow.